Our third panelist today is Karmel Melamed. Karmel is an award-winning and internationally published journalist, activist, and attorney based out of Los Angeles. Born in Iran and fluent in Persian, which I am not, Karmel fled Iran at a young age after the Islamic Revolution with his family to escape persecution from the Ayatollah's newly established regime. As a journalist since 2000, he has given a new voice to the successful Iranian communities living in the United States, as well as having covered issues relating to Iran and the Middle East. Over the years, Karmel has received numerous journalism awards, including the first prize for the Natan Sharansky Activism Award in 2020. I was also told he's not a big fan of podiums, so he's going to be doing some walking around. And with that, I'd like to welcome Karmel on stage.
It's a real honor. It's a pleasure to be here. I actually flew out from Los Angeles last night to be with you all. This topic of Iran and Israel is very, very near and dear to my heart. I have spent almost the last 25 years reporting on the Iranian American community, and during that process, I've come across this topic of Iran and Israel. Not just in biblical times, but in contemporary times. And it's been exciting, mind-blowing, and often surprising that this history has not been shared. Not been shared by the Iranian community, not been shared by the Israeli community. And it's a really, really fascinating and beautiful example of what can come when this Islamic regime is gone from Iran. Before I get into this topic, I want to share a very brief story of something that happened, something I came across last year in November, right after the October 7th attacks. This was in November of 2023. In Los Angeles, there were a lot of gatherings of the Jewish community, the Israeli community, to support the victims of October 7th. And in many occasions, here and there were Iranians that would show up with the lion and sun flag that you see here. And in one instance, I saw this gentleman standing alone, not with the other Israelis, with the Israeli and American flags. And he was kind of looking sad, silent tears. And I approached him and I said, you know, you look Iranian. I'm Iranian as well. Are you Jewish? Is this why you're here? And he said, no, I'm not Jewish. And I said, okay, what's the reason? Why are you here? And he said, I'm here because of, and I'm changing the names. I'm giving you another name. I'm here because of Mahvash and Mansour. And I said, okay, who is Mahvash and Mansour? And he said, who are you and why do you want to know? I said, I'm a reporter. I'm interested in this story. I want to know why you as an Iranian who's not Jewish is here at this pro-Israel rally. And he said, let me share you this quick story. In the early 1960s, Mahvash and Mansour were an Iranian couple in Iran. They had been married for almost 10 years. They could not conceive children. It was heartbreaking for them. Excuse me. It's a really emotional story. And they turned everywhere. They came to the US, they came to Europe, they went all around the world trying to find a cure for the infertility. They couldn't have kids. They lived with his mother, who was a very, very religious, fervent Muslim, and criticized him for marrying his wife, who was not. She was a secular Iranian. She didn't follow any kind of religion. And his mother blamed her for not being religious. That's why she couldn't have children. Their relationship was very rocky because they couldn't have children. They lived with his mother. There's a lot of turmoil in their marriage. Somehow, somebody that worked with Mansour told him, hey, why don't you go to Israel? They have medical treatments there. You may be able to conceive, you and your wife. And he said, Israel? I don't understand. And he said, trust me. Get a visa, get a medical visa from the informal Israeli embassy, because Iran did not have formal relations, and seek medical treatment for your wife's infertility. He was at his wit's end. The marriage was falling apart. Family was falling apart. Been married for 10 years with no kids. And a lot of you who are here that are Iranian know how much pressure that is, because our culture is all about family and children. And so he and his wife decided to go to Israel. And long story short, they conceived. And they had a son. Their son was this gentleman that I met at the rally. And he said, I am here as an Iranian because the state of Israel existed in the early 1970s. I am here because an Israeli medical expert helped my parents conceive me. It is my duty, it is my honor to come here and stand with the Jewish people and with Israel during this time of peril. And it was just mind-blowing for me, because it goes back to all these examples I've seen through my reporting over the years of how there was this tremendously incredible relationship between Iran and Israel that has been forgotten, that has been ignored. So let's take a look at that. The relationship between the Jewish people and the Iranian people really begins in 586 BC with the destruction of the Jewish temple by Nebuchadnezzar. And that's his, on the left-hand side, that's his statue. And Nebuchadnezzar destroys Jerusalem, ransacks the Jewish temple, and takes the Jews captive back to Babylon. Babylon is today modern-day Iran and Iraq. And 70 years later, Cyrus the Great emancipates them, allows them to return back to Judea. Many of them return. Some of them stay in Persia. Cyrus is mentioned more than 20 times in the Holy Bible. This is another topic that a lot of folks don't really talk about. Cyrus is beloved by the Jewish people, and he's also beloved by the Iranian people. 2,500 years, 2,700 years, this leader of Iran, this founder of the nation, continues to be a uniting force for both people. And then at the same time, we have the story of Purim, the book of Esther. And that is actually the mausoleum in the Iranian city of Hamadan for Esther and Mordecai. And that's another common bond between, ancient common bond between the Jewish people and the people of Iran. I'm going to skip forward. There's a lot of Jewish and Iranian history, but I'm going to skip forward to contemporary times, the 20th century. And I really believe that the golden era of the Jewish people and the Iranian people was during the Pahlavi king's dynasty. Reza Shah on your left and Mohammad Reza Shah, his son, on your right, were incredible supporters of the Jews of Iran. Reza Shah emancipated the Jews of Iran, allowed them to leave their ghettos, allowed them to obtain higher education, fully integrated them with Iranian society, allowed them to prosper, protected them. He was truly a new Cyrus. And his son, Mohammad Reza Shah, continued that relationship and not only allowed for the success of the Jews of Iran, but also helped the Jews escaping Nazi Europe during World War II, and also the Jews of Iraq, and we're going to get into that. So there are many Iranians that are righteous among the nations from the time of the Holocaust, a topic that a lot of folks don't get into. One that is somewhat well known is about the Tehran children. And these were young children, Jewish children from Poland that were sent via Iran, via trains to Iran. Their lives were saved. Hundreds of Jewish children. And Iran became a safe haven. The late Shah allowed that to happen. And all of those Jewish children went on, eventually emigrated to Palestine, modern-day Israel, and had families. At the same time, during the Holocaust, you had the Iranian diplomat, Abdul Hossein Sardari. And that's his picture right there on the right-hand side. And Mr. Sardari was a diplomat in Paris in the consulate, and he realized what the Nazis were doing, not just to the Iranian Jews in Paris, but what they were doing to European Jews. And he provided visas to them and passports to them and saved hundreds of Jewish lives. He didn't ask. He did it because he knew that it was the right thing to do. So this is another remarkable connection that the Iranian people in contemporary times have with the Jewish community. Another topic that a lot of folks don't discuss or have been ignored over the years has been the saving of thousands of Jews from Iraq. People forget, in the late 1940s, 1947, 1948, the Jews of Iraq and the Jews in many Arab Islamic countries, not Iran, were being persecuted. And many were fleeing into Iran. The late Shah, blessed memory, gave them safe haven. They fled from places like Iraqi Kurdistan into Iran, from the port city of Basra into Khorramshahr in Iran. Iranians, individual Iranians, helped them, gave them safe haven, fed them, kept them in their homes, and eventually allowed them to emigrate to Israel. This saved thousands of lives. I believe it's from 1947 until 1953, something like 47,000 Jews of Iraqi descent emigrated to Israel via Iran. Those Jews today are in the hundreds of thousands in Israel. So Iran and Israel, during the era of the Shah, did not have formal relations, but they did have de facto relations. That began in 1950. And the main driving force for that was the fact that they were ancient friends. And also, the Iranians were no friends of the Arabs, and the Israelis were no friends of the Arabs. So they saw that as a potential great relationship. It was kept undercover. The Iranian government did not want to publicize this, but there was a tremendous amount of cooperation and friendship and trade. We're going to get into that. In my opinion, my personal opinion, what transformed the relationship was the efforts of Mr. Meir Ezri, and that's the gentleman in your top left-hand corner. Mr. Ezri was an Iranian Jew who emigrated to Israel and became an Israeli citizen. Ben-Gurion tapped him to become the unofficial ambassador to Iran. And Ezri said, my background is in agriculture. I don't know the first thing about diplomacy. And Ben-Gurion said, no, you speak Persian language, you know the Persian culture. What's good for Iran is also good for Israel. I want you to go. And in 1958, he went there. And he began this relationship. he began the diplomatic relationship and the economic relationship and the cultural exchanges and the sports activities. And during the course of his work, he came across Iranians that were doing business with Israel and wanted to expand that. And you have in your lower right-hand corner the Nazarian brothers. That's one example. And the name of their company was Technois. That was short for Technology of Israel. What were they doing? They were importing construction equipment from Europe and also from Israel. And Iran was in a construction boom during the 1960s and 70s. Your top right-hand corner is another gentleman, Mr. Ibrahim Yahid. Mr. Yahid was involved with agricultural activities in Iran, and he imported Israeli technology, the drip technology that you have in a lot of the agricultural facilities in Israel, and that transformed agriculture in Iran. And then in your lower left-hand corner is a picture of David Ben-Gurion talking to the unofficial Iranian diplomat, Mr. Reza Safiini. So there was a military security and intelligence alliance between Iran and Israel. As I mentioned, both were no friends of the Arabs. So they decided to cooperate with one another. There was a tremendous amount of cooperation, intelligence sharing between both countries. Israel was selling arms to Iran from the 1960s into the 1970s up to the 1979 revolution. The Iranian Air Force flew F-4 and F-5 Phantoms. Israeli pilots trained many Iranian pilots in Iran. We don't talk about that. This is not discussed, but there was a tremendous amount of military and intelligence cooperation. They even had Project Flower. That was a secret joint project to develop missiles. This is something that we don't really discuss, and it was a significant alliance. Oops. Trade. There was trade, there was business, there was technology exchanges between Iran and Israel during that time. Many times it was driven by Iranians of the Jewish faith. And here you have a photo, a snapshot of the Elghanian brothers. And you're in the dead center, lower dead center is a photo of Mr. Habib Elghanian. Mr. Elghanian was a Jewish Iranian, and same with his brothers. Their family were industrialists. They had many, many factories in Iran. They made a range of products like injection molded consumer goods, wood, plastics, metallics, you name it. A lot of the technology that they utilized was from Israel. They also they were also responsible for building the World Diamond Center in Ramat Gan in Israel. So they invested in Israel as Iranians. And this is just an example of Iran's Jews that were involved with commerce. There were many, many Iranians of the Baha'i faith, of the Zoroastrian faith, of the Muslim faith that did commerce and trade with Iran. Infrastructure and construction. Many people forget that in 1960, the late Shah had the White Revolution. And he was modernizing Iran, rebuilding the infrastructure, new roads, new construction of dams, highways, freeways, you name it. It was a no-brainer. The Israelis were involved. They many times had joint ventures in a lot of these construction projects. The first skyscraper, and I put that in quotations, was the Plasko building. It was built by the Elghanian family, and it was built in 1962. People don't know that building was designed by Israeli architects. It was the first high-rise in Tehran, 17 stories, which was huge. For 1962 in Tehran, that was huge. Sadly, the Plasko building collapsed, I believe it was 2017, because of negligence by the Islamic Republic. It was a catastrophe that took a lot of innocent Iranian lives. But it was an example of that great relationship between Israel and Iran. And you had, again, as I said, the Nazarian brothers. In the lower center is a photo of Musa Kermanian, another businessman. There were many, many joint ventures in the construction and infrastructure realm between Iranian businesses and Israeli businesses. Agriculture and food. Many folks do not know that the kibbutzim, the moshavim in Israel, went to Iran, helped educate the Iranian farmers on which crops would work best with the Iranian soil. Iran is a big country. It's got different regions, different provinces, different temperatures, and helped them out and gave them training, cooperated with them with the realm of, growing everything from cherry tomatoes to having dairy farms and chickens and you name it. The sky was the limit. You also had, kibbutzim like Kibbutz Degania. They provided sprayers for the agricultural fields. There was a tremendous amount of exchanges between the two nations. Water, sewage systems, another area that Israel excelled at during the 1960s and 70s. And many times, Israeli companies were the most competitive in pricing. And they had the world's foremost experts in water. Let's not forget, Israel is a desert country, but they're blooming. Even today, after 75 years, they're blooming their deserts. Well, in the 60s and 70s, they were doing it for Iran. The sewage systems, the water systems in cities like Kermanshah, Hamadan, Bandar Abbas were made by Israelis. Even today, those systems which have not been upgraded were originally Israeli systems. You had Israeli companies like IDE that created desalinization systems on the Iranian military bases. And the regime, the Islamic regime, since they cut relations with Iran, are still operating a lot of those desalinization units on their military bases by reverse engineering. But that's all Israeli technology. And you have a photo here of the Israeli water expert. His name slips my mind, but he's meeting here with the late Shah. We're going to get into it, but there was a horrific earthquake in 1962 in the Ghazvin region of Iran, and the Israelis were there to help rebuild Ghazvin. And during that process, the Israeli engineers found water. It was a phenomenal discovery. Iranians hadn't found sweet, fresh water in Ghazvin for 500 years. And here these Israelis overnight have found it. Medical tourism and medical education. So there were, during the 60s and 70s, sometimes there were a lack of medical physicians, specialists in Iran, and it was expensive for Iranians to go to Europe or America for medical treatment. So they came to Israel. They got visas and they got treatment. Two of the most popular areas were issues of infertility, which we spoke about that gentleman, and ophthalmology, eye issues. In areas such as Ahvaz, where they had petroleum and oil refineries, many of the people, many of the workers had eye infections from the oil that was in the air. And they couldn't get treatment in Iran. Many went blind. But eventually word got out that in Israel they could treat them. So these children, many times poverty-stricken, would be flown to Israel. The funding would be provided by the Iranian government, or sometimes even Israel, and they would be saved. Their vision would be saved. At the same time, people don't realize, but there were a lot of young Iranians that went to the Israeli universities for medical training, for physicians. They became physicians. Schools like the Technion, they went and got trained. And even today, we have an older generation of physicians and scientists and engineers that are Iranian that were educated in the Israeli universities. There was a significant amount of academic exchanges between Iranians and Israelis. This is another topic that people don't talk about. A great example of that on your left-hand side, top left-hand side, is the late Professor Amnon Netzer. And Dr. Netzer was an Iranian Israeli. He was born in Iran, but he emigrated to Israel. And his area of focus was Judeo-Persian language. Judeo-Persian is perhaps one of the oldest Persian languages spoken by the Jews of Iran, going back to biblical times. And we see an example of that right there in the center. It is Persian, ancient Persian language, but written with Jewish letters, with Hebrew letters. And it was the common language of the Jews of Iran for centuries. He traveled to Iran for many, many years, going from city to city, village to village, researching this language, talking to the elders, recording this vital information, and also the other ancient Persian languages. And he became one of the world's foremost experts in linguistics, Persian linguistics. And then at the same time, you had Iranians of the Zoroastrian faith, such as Professor Farhang Mehr, that went to Israel to exchange information about Islamic poetry, Persian writings. The Persian poets were famous, Rumi, Ferdowsi. There were a lot of exchanges on the cultural side of the academia. If you look at the memoirs of Meir Ezri, the informal Israeli ambassador to Iran, he talks about many, many technical conferences that took place at Tehran University in the medical realm. Israeli physicians and scientists would come to Iran and provide information about what they had researched and learned with their Iranian colleagues. So there was a lot of academic interaction that, again, people don't really talk about. Tourism. No one ever talks about the tourism. There were 18 weekly flights for El Al between Tehran and Tel Aviv. Today, that's unheard of because the two countries don't have relations. But that's really significant for the Middle East. It was not spoken, but there were regular flights between both countries. And you had Iranians of different faiths, Jewish, Christian, Baha'i, Zoroastrian, that believed that Jerusalem is a holy city, and they wanted to make pilgrimage. They wanted to visit. And so they were able to do that, and vice versa. There were Israelis and Jews that wanted to go to Iran to visit the holy sites. There are Jewish holy sites, such as the tomb of Esther and Mordecai in Iran. So there was a tremendous amount of tourism going on between the two countries. Music and entertainment. I love this. No one ever talks about this. There was an incredible amount of Iranian pop music, popular music, from singers, famous Iranian singers like Mahasti, Hayede, Vigen, that made concerts in Israel regularly, not once or twice. One of the most famous impresarios in Iran was Manucher Bibian, and he's right there on the left-hand corner with the popular Iranian singer Hayede. And Mr. Bibian was an Iranian Jew, but he is the father of modern music for Iran. A lot of Iran's modern popular music was created by him, by his recording company. I call him the Berry Gordy of Iranian popular music. He was really, truly a phenomenal visionary. And a lot of the popular music that we have today from these famous Iranian singers, he developed and he shared with Israeli audiences regularly. And on the flip side, you had Israeli artists and musicians that came to Iran and performed. An example is on your right-hand side, a popular Israeli singer, Tova Porat. She came to Iran. She came to clubs like the Moulin Rouge in Tehran, and she performed alongside Iranian popular singers like Gugush. And it's something that's really phenomenal. People don't talk about the entertainment and the musical exchanges. Sports and international games. At a time when the Arab countries and the Islamic countries were boycotting Israel at the Asian Games, Iran was not. And many times, such as, the 1968 Asian Soccer Cup finale, it was between Israel and Iran. And interestingly, Iran won. And it was a big hubbub during that time. Obviously, I was not born. It's before my time. But it was a incredible brouhaha that went on. And the fact that the Israelis were welcome to Iran and had this sports exchange was something that was truly newsworthy and really beautiful. And they were able, as friends, to have sportsmanship. And it's something we don't see today. Unfortunately, the Islamic Republic creates an environment where they don't want Iranian athletes to even participate in any international sports or Olympic games with Israeli athletes. But there's a history of it that occurred. You had many times, you had exhibitions of sporting activities such as boxing, wrestling. This is a poster for an Iranian and Israeli boxers that Iranian boxer came to Israel. They had a boxing match. And that's something that, again, we don't really talk about this, but there were a lot of sports activities and a lot of goodwill that was created. You had the 7th Asian Games in Tehran in 1974. A lot of Israeli athletes participated. Unfortunately, this beautiful cooperation and alliance and friendship came to a screeching halt in 1979 with the Islamic Republic and the Islamic Revolution. And they cut all ties with Israel. Unfortunately, the Khomeini regime saw Israel as the enemy. He's a radical Islamist and cut that relationship. But Israel still was supporting Iran. And at that time, you had the Iran-Iraq War. Many people don't talk about this, but even though the Khomeini and Islamic regime were enemies of Israel, they did purchase weapons from Israel to fight in the Iran-Iraq War. Many Iranian lives were saved. Iranian territory was protected because of weaponry that Israel provided. Another topic that people don't talk about during this era is the fact that Israel, in 1981, struck the Iraqi nuclear site that Saddam was building. Saddam was building a nuclear reactor. Where do you think he was going to shoot that nuclear bomb? It's during the Iran-Iraq War. He would have shot that in Iran. So the Israelis essentially saved millions of Iranian lives by attacking that nuclear reactor. They saved Israeli lives, but they also saved Iranian lives. Iranians haven't forgotten that. And more recently, what's got me excited is you have one of the main Iranian opposition leaders, the Crown Prince of Iran, and his wife that visited Israel last April. And this was a truly historic event. It's the first time an Iranian leader had been invited to Israel and shared this sense of friendship that the people of Iran have with the people of Israel, and rekindled this incredible ancient friendship that the two people have had. And it brought so much excitement to Iranians in Iran and Iranians outside of Iran. And we got a small glimpse at what could be with the Cyrus Accords. And it's coming, my friends. It's coming real soon. The people of Iran today want this friendship back. I'm not just saying this. They're telling us, guys, look at the social media posts. Look at the graffiti. They've even told you in English, hit them, Israel. Iranians are behind you. In that lower left-hand corner, it says, Israel will be the victor. In that top right-hand corner says, in the future, anti-Semitism will not be tolerated in Iran. This is the new generation of Iranians that are saying, we love the Jewish people. We love the Israeli people. We want this friendship back. This regime, this Islamic regime is evil. It doesn't represent us. I'm sure many of you have seen the videos and the photos of the Islamic Republic putting flags of Israel on the floor, outside of many universities and buildings. The Iranians refuse to step on the flags of Israel. They're telling us through their actions. They can't tell us verbally because they live under duress. But they're telling us through their actions, we don't agree with this regime. We want this friendship. We have nothing against the people of Israel. Where I see this relationship going once this Islamic regime is gone, and it's gonna go, my friends. The Islamic Republic is on its way out. Iran will need to rebuild. What better friend than Israel? The foundations of peace and cooperation are there. They were laid 50 to 60 years ago, as I indicated. And Israel helped Iran tremendously. We could build on that. It's not like the Abraham Accords where nothing had happened between the Arabs and the Israelis. There is something there that could be built on. The number one thing is resolving a lot of these crises that Iran has today. Israel's know-how, cooperation with Iranian experts could help the crumbling infrastructure that Iran has today. This Islamic regime is evil. It has not invested a penny of the billions of petrodollars into rebuilding Iran's infrastructure. The electrical grid is from the 60s, sometimes from the 70s. Israel could help that. You have a water crisis. There's water shortages throughout Iran. Israel is the world's foremost expert in water technology. There are so many facets of Iranian life where the Israelis could be critical to helping rebuild Iran. And I am so grateful to this organization, the Civil Rights Defense Council, for putting together this event, because they're not just reaffirming this relationship between Iran and Israel, but they're looking at the future and saying, we need this relationship back. As Iranians, as Iranian Americans, we love Iran so much, and we see the potential for so much good that could come about for Iran. And we're looking forward to that new Iran and rebuilding it. And it's going to happen. A big part of the success is through the relationship with Israel. Another area that gets me really excited about the Iran-Israel relationship is the technology. Israel is known as the startup nation. There's a lot of high tech going on there. But guess what? There's a lot of Iranians that are also involved in the high-tech sector. We're seeing them in Silicon Valley and California. We're seeing them in Europe. We're even seeing them in Iran. They are geniuses. They are running a lot of these very successful high-tech companies in the US. Imagine what would happen if you had both high-tech nations and companies and experts cooperating with each other. The sky would be the limit. It wouldn't just help transform the Middle East. It would transform the world. The world would benefit from this cooperation. You have companies like WaterGen that are creating water out of air. That would almost overnight solve a lot of the water issues that Iran is having. There is so much potential on the technological and trade and business side for this relationship. And this is a little something from me. I believe the Iranian Jewish community is the potential secret sauce to make this Iran-Israel relationship a success. They have ties with the Jewish community in Israel, and they have ties with the Iranian community. The Iranian Jews for millennia have been proud patriots of Iran. They still love Iran. They were expelled by the Ayatollahs. They were forced to flee. Their community leader, Habib al-Ghanian, was executed. But they still love Iran. They still play Iranian music. They still speak Persian language. They still cook Persian food. They would be the bridge, a great bridge, to build between both nations. And you have Iranian Israelis, like in the top left-hand corner, like Rita, the famous Israeli singer. She's of Iranian descent. How beautiful would it be if she had concerts in Tehran? You have the vice mayor of Beverly Hills, Dr. Sharona Nazarian, in the top center. She's the vice mayor of Beverly Hills, one of the most luxurious, well-off cities in America. What could she do to bring together Iran and Israel once this regime is gone? You have scientists like Dr. Yudim in your top right-hand corner that's developing drugs to fight Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's. He's of Iranian descent. Imagine what would happen if an expert like him went to Iran and cooperated with Iranian scientists. What drugs could they develop to cure all these diseases and issues that we have? The list goes on and on. I can't advocate enough for this relationship, the importance of this relationship. We must form these friendships today between the Jewish community, Israeli community, and the Iranian community. The Cyrus Accords are coming on us, my friends. We got to get ready for it. We got to start laying out the foundations. And the foundations have been laid out. The history is there. We got to build on it. Thank you so much.